Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me, as always, is the Chris Hemsworth to my Liam Hemsworth, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
Today we're talking about brownies and house spirits.
Brownies and house spirits are, there's a whole bunch of variations on this particular idea. The idea that there are these little creatures that live in the house with you and will sometimes do tasks and sometimes give you mischief.
Mm-hmm.
They're known under a bunch of different names, sometimes called brownies or house elves or hobs, silkies, buboks, finodries. There's a whole bunch of different names for them. Those are just the UK selection, but I know that these also extend into Germany as well. It gets manifested in a lot of different ways. There's The Borrowers, which is a series of books, and then also got made into a beautiful Studio Ghibli film, which is about little tiny people that live in the house with you. And there's also the house elves of Harry Potter fame, which are these little house servants that are slaves, I guess, until you give them clothing. And they even show up in Terry Pratchett as the Nachmachfiegel, who are tiny little horrible Scottish men who like to fight and aren't ever helpful at all. But yeah, this, you can kind of see how a legend like this might erupt or develop over time. It's kind of an outgrowth of superstition. It's where the term knock on wood comes from. The idea that these creatures were wood spirits, and if you invoked their bad name, you would try to appease them, I guess, by knocking on wood. And actually have to find some wood to wrap your knuckles against was a way to sort of signal to them that you still cared, I guess. I'll admit I'm pulling that one off the top of my head. And so if I'm wrong, just yell at me on Twitter. But yeah, so there are these creatures that live very intimately with humans in the same buildings as us, which is kind of interesting because you kind of imagine other versions of the Fae and fairies and things like that. They're always sort of apart. So it's kind of interesting that there's a manifestation of them that are, in people's own houses, which is pretty cool.
Speaking of someone who, frequently loses his keys or his cell phone, I can see how this kind of spirit living in the house or something, someone must have moved my keys. That kind of thing would arise. I'm sure a phenomenon that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, and people are really good at anthropomorphizing things. We love to think of everything as having been done by an agent, a person that could have done something. And so yeah, we love this little version. And then also people just love tiny people. That idea just shows up a lot, with Lilliputians and things, and the Indian in the cupboard and all that. So I could see how those cross over really well. I had an idea, which was I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of a new word of the day, which is synanthrope or a synanthropic creature. These are animals that are well adapted to living with humans or in our near vicinity. Obviously, something like a dog is synanthropic, although they are domesticated. But there's a whole category of them that aren't domestic, but are synanthropic, like pigeons and rats and mice, and probably cockroaches too. Let me see what the list here says.
Probably raccoons.
Yeah.
Go off the top of my head there.
Oh, yeah. And urban foxes are a good example too. There's these creatures that find an ecological niche by just having humans around. There's also some of them that are there's varying degrees of it. There's the ones that are really close to us, but there's also ones that we were talking in our Phoenix's episode about birds and plants that thrive under fire. Because of the spread of fire, and humans are really good at spreading wildfires. In fact, we used to do it as a form of hunting and also as a way of land clearing in order to have area for crops. So there are creatures that actually benefit off of us from certain activities that we do. So in that sense, brownies or house spirits could be a wild fairy that happens to have an adaptation that makes them really good at living with humans, and they find themselves in this little ecological niche that they can exploit, which I think would be an interesting take on them. It's what is it about them that makes them excellent for inhabiting our houses and exploiting the things around us?
Interesting. There's the obvious ones there's a lot of food around humans. Although I feel there's maybe a more interesting, more esoteric angle to take with this. Although what that is.
Yeah, I'm thinking like maybe what they get from us isn't necessarily like our material resources, but something about humans, that they don't get elsewhere. Maybe it's like the respect or something like that they feed off of.
Interesting.
Which explains why they're kind of vindictive. Like if their name is taken, if you piss them off, basically they're going to start hiding your keys until you appease them. And what they're not really looking for the material object that you give them. They're mostly looking for you to like pay them some respect. So they're like little mobsters in that game, in that way. Or I guess part of the question is like, what is it? How would this manifest in the quote unquote wild? Like when they're off as part of the fairy courts or whatnot, when they're living amongst the rest of the fae, what role do they form that they can then makes them well suited to adapting to working with humans? Maybe they were the craftsmen of the fae courts, things like that. They make the like little trinkets and things. They set up the tables and they make the furniture and stuff like that. And then that makes them very at home with the objects of our world because they tend to be, they're very comfortable with things like tables and chairs and things. And so they make the tools that they, I don't know. I'm coming at this from a couple of different angles in my head. They like find themselves very at home in a crafted world, which is what humans have.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, like because they're the craftsmen of that realm, they want to be around made objects, and humans are really good at that. So they like find themselves at home, and where their power is greatest when they are surrounded by carved wood and crafted metal and things like that. And maybe for that same reason, they don't have quite the same weakness to iron that other fairies do, because they're used to it. They like have become acclimated, and that makes them well suited to living alongside humans. And then also that would tie them into the old myth of like the what's the fairy tale one where the cobbler has all of his shoes made at night by some helpful fairies.
Oh yeah.
You could imagine that same sort of. Does that sound good to you? You want to or do you want to riff on some other?
No, that's definitely kind of an interesting angle. That I like the idea that they need like a synthetic or manufactured environment to thrive in.
Yeah. In fact, like amongst the fairies, they might find themselves actually kind of at a disadvantage. Like they're needed, and the others keep them around to make stuff. But because the rest of them are all a little bit more nature oriented and a little bit more, they don't want to have their entire world crafted. That like they end up fighting with the other fae a lot. Like they end up finding themselves in conflict because, they would like to build houses and live inside them and have these little cities and things. And all the other fae are like, get this out of here. I want to be able to see the sky. I want to have trees around. I want to have a dirt floor. And the brownies are like, dude, like, but we could have polished marble, and we could have, what's the floor that everybody wants nowadays?
Gosh, the laminate floors.
Yeah, or like laminate floors, or like scraped hardwood, or
poured concrete floors.
I just thought of the brownies as the Pinterest interior designers of the fairy world. They're like, oh yeah, well it's all subway tile this year, and we really want an under counter sink, and it's really important that we have the. Oh, and also the idea of IKEA elves. They live in an IKEA because it's the perfect round for them. I like that. And then coming back to the idea of what they want from the humans isn't like a material object. It's just, like I said, respect. And like, they want to get along, they want to have the humans value them. Other than that, they don't necessarily need food and drink from us. They can acquire that for themselves.
I think that's kind of an interesting idea. I do kind of like the idea that there's something they get from humans that they don't get at all. Maybe it completely changes their standing in the Fae realm. Like somehow, like maybe there's something that like the Fae don't want the brownies to have this power, which is why they've kind of been pushed to the fringes of Fae society, and why they mesh so well with humans. It's because they're kind of almost outcast.
That's an excellent idea. I'm just trying to think about what that would be. I mean, like the answer that I gravitate towards, but I think is wrong, is something like freedom. Like they love the idea of getting outside of that sort of strict caste society. But I feel like that's a little too, almost too easy an answer. Like it needs to be something a little bit weirder. Maybe it's something more like they crave novelty, like the same way that humans do. Like humans are always doing something new and different.
Mm-hmm.
We crave the new and like to innovate and things like that. And that the brownies want that as well. Like they really, really want to see new things. And most of the rest of the Fae, almost all the rest of the Fae, like are much more traditionally minded. And they like to see the things that, you know, they like to be tied back into the past. They don't want things to change over time, which really does make these guys the Pinterest elves, because they seriously want to see the seasonal change of like interior design and of like fashions to change and things like that. Whereas the rest of the Fae courts like definitely want everything to be the same that as it has been for the last 10,000 years.
I love the idea that like to the Fae, like there's like one movie they watch, one play they see, one joke they tell.
Yeah. And they view that as like refining perfection. Like they're chasing making that one version of it as good as possible. Like they're trying to like, let's say that their play is like, it's like Hamlet or something like that. And they're trying to just get that down to an absolute perfect note for note, like absolutely as perfect as possible, and like wring every little bit of meaning out of it that they can, and get all of the timings right all of the time, and like make the costumes as perfect as possible. But they never get tired of seeing it again and again. They just want to see the best possible version of it that they possibly can. Mm-hmm. So there is like, they have a motivation. It's not that they're like stodgy or like afraid of the change. It's that they just want like to start over from square one with something new. Like they're going to switch from Hamlet over to Book of Mormon, I guess. And they're like, dude, we're going to lose 10,000 years of progress that we have made working on this thing. And like to throw all of that away, all of the little changes that have been wrung out of this thing over millennia, and to go start again from a new one, they'd be like, no, that's just a waste of time. Why on earth would you do that? Whereas the brownies are like, no, we want to try something new, you know?
Maybe the brownies are already seen as like too human-like in that regard.
Yeah, too malleable, too changeable. And so when they kind of quote unquote escape, when they leave the fairy courts and then find themselves in human homes as humans develop, they go, oh, hey, this is perfect. This, like, these guys are changing all the time. I'm also thinking like brownie fashion designers who are like coming up with the clothes for the next season.
Yeah.
Brownies wear Prada, you know? I like that. I like that a lot. So let's say that you're a human with some of these brownies living in your home, and you manage to piss them off somehow. Maybe we should start working on the rules of like what it is that makes them mad. But if you want to appease them, like your options are things like give them a pail of milk or something like that. But what they would actually love is if you wrote them a poem or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Like they want to see a creative work, or maybe even like if you handed over like part of the house to them and said, here, do whatever you want to this corner of the room. And they like, oh, okay, great. And they get to design something for it, you know, giving them the freedom to do something might actually be what they're looking for. And like, or just to show them something new, something they've never seen before. Like like if you're in a rural area in Central Europe and you show them a seashell, which is like it doesn't exist in this area. And they go, oh my God, this is amazing. And like, that is the kind of gift they're really looking for, is things that they're like bring novelty into their life.
I'm just imagining them being like when you play like an MMO, like World of Warcraft, and they have like those annual seasonal events, like they're all about the Christmas seasonal event each year.
Oh yeah.
Because it's brief, it's ephemeral, but it's like all this new stuff. It's just like a novelty overload almost.
Yeah. Well, and by the same token, if they've carried forward into a more modern realm, like now, modern age, like now, if they get on the internet, they're going to go fucking ape shit, man. Like they're going to love the internet. Things change there all the time. That's fantastic. I raised the question a second ago. What is it that pisses these guys off? Because I like that idea that like if you do something wrong, they will start fucking with you. What is it that sets them off?
Oh gosh, I feel like destruction of like their designs is probably a huge no. Like
it could even be things that they have crafted for you. And they're like, this is a thing that they've put in the house because they think that you'll like it. And it doesn't even look like it doesn't look like it. It looks like something natural or a mess or something. And so you inadvertently clear something away that they think is a work of art. Like they have, they particularly train a spider to spin a web in the corner of the room in a pattern that they think is beautiful, and you like haphazardly knock it down with a broom, and now you've pissed them off, and they're coming after you now. I like that, where it's stuff that like you wouldn't even recognize necessarily.
So what is it? What happens when you do piss off Brownie? Traditionally, they've been done things like, they spoil your milk, or hide your keys, that kind of thing. Do we stick with that, or?
I think that's definitely an aspect of it, although I don't think that they have to be limited to that. I think maybe that's the old way they used to do things. And now, like, as technology has progressed and they've gotten more adept with it, maybe they're also the origin of the gremlins myth, where the gremlins, at least in like early parts of the 20th century and earlier, are like specifically like creatures that send technology wrong. And so that might actually just be an outgrowth of these brownies who are like, they've figured out steam engines, they've figured out electronics, they've figured out internal combustion engines, and they can make them go wrong if you've pissed them off. So they've moved away from spoiling your milk, and they'll still hide your keys because that's a classic, and they're never going to give up the classics.
Here they degrade your Wi-Fi signal.
Exactly. Yeah. They make sure that your phone doesn't ring when it's important, and then occasionally it'll just set off a notification sound, and then you'll pick it up, and there won't be a notification there.
Or they'll have their own pre-programmed system updates that they run on your phone at the worst time.
Yeah, and they're the ones that make the phones go slower over time, even though they're not getting system updates anymore, and they shouldn't possibly be getting slower. But it's still like it's like excruciating now. They're the ones that send the surge down the electrical line to blow the fuse at the worst possible moment.
They turn off your alarm clock when you swear you said it.
Absolutely, and they're also the ones who like because I think they're so cued into fashion and stuff. They're also the ones that like the moment that you buy those whatever kind of jeans are in fashion now. I think it's mom jeans. Are mom jeans in fashion? I don't know. Anyway, so the moment that you buy some nice mom jeans, they're the ones, the high-waisted ones. They're the ones that immediately change the fashion, and now no low-cut ones are in style. Like they will change the entire world of fashion just to make sure that you suffer.
I love it. The secret world of fashion is run by ephemeral house spirits.
Yeah, I'm all for that. In fact, aren't they called fashion houses?
I have no idea.
I think that's right. It is a term. Yeah. Okay. Fashion house is a term. It's just a group of associated designers, sometimes called a house. That aside, so I love the idea that these guys, like, they have a role in fairy society. And in fact, maybe in the time since they seem to be more adapted to human life than they are back to the fairy court. Maybe the fairies there are no brownies left amongst the fairies anymore. And like they're having a real hard time getting a hold of, because just because they don't want to change things doesn't mean that like things don't wear out. So like they need a new like dining table every couple thousand years. And all of those things that the brownies used to make for them are slowly wearing out. And so now if you went to the fairy courts now, all of the tables are propped up by a couple of books, because they're no longer level, and like everybody's clothes are starting to get too tattered and worn and things like that because the brownies aren't there to make things for them anymore.
So what if it's been like so long that the fairies don't really remember what brownies look like?
Okay.
And so they just remember they're kind of small. So when they like abduct children, they're actually like trying to find a handyman to repair their stuff.
Oh, that's perfect. So they take a child, and they're like, they hand them a screwdriver, and they're like, I really need you to fix the Wi-Fi.
I love it.
I guess it wouldn't be Wi-Fi, but it would be like, okay, here is a table. I need it to be level. And this like little 4-year-old kid is like staring at it like, what the am I supposed to do?
Amazing. Yeah,
I love the idea that they've been gone, because at this point, if if the brownies left, let's say a couple thousand years ago, as humans like started to develop technology and like became a more hospitable zone, and like once they figured out that humans were a nicer place to live with, like they could come live in our houses, that like they just like abandoned the fairies wholesale. Like they're done. We're out of here. You guys never want to be doing anything fun. We're just going. And so now it's been about 3,000-4,000 years, something like that, since the brownies were there. And so all of this stuff that like it's either gone now or it's like in really rough shape. Yeah, I like that a lot.
And they'd never actually like give up that stuff for anything new, because
no, they're not gonna like go to IKEA and buy a new dresser, because that's not the kind they like. They like the kind that the brownies used to make back in the day.
Yeah.
But or maybe they just get so incredibly desperate that they finally do, and that's when they find the IKEA brownies, the ones that live in IKEA. I definitely love the visual of the high courts being just completely run down and kind of shattered, but they're still chasing perfection in all those little ways that they want. That's really cool. That's a nice imagery. That's some nice imagery. And then also, like, by comparison, you've got like the Keebler elves have gone full industrial manufacturing processes, and like they all wear black turtlenecks because they like Steve Jobs. And in fact, maybe every tech bro billionaire at this point is actually just a brownie riding around in a mech suit.
A tech bro suit.
Let's see, how else could we use these guys? We haven't really talked about how they could be used in a story at this point. They would have a lot in common with the Germanic and Nordic origin of the dwarf, what they would have called dwarves, which were sort of a dark elf. Yeah. Who are the ones that make all of the, they're the ones who make, the magic rings and the best swords and everything like that. You can imagine a protagonist who's like, I need a magic sword. The first place they might go is actually like literally ask the brownies that live in a house, hey, who makes the best magic swords? Like, and that could lead you down a trail to finding the Svartalf, that could be cool. And also just like pissing them off and having that be kind of an antagonist for a story could be pretty cool.
I was kind of like the idea, like sort of updating that like magic sword myth to like the modern era. Like, what if like I need my magic AR-15 or something.
Is it the Dark Tower where the guy has a pair of pistols that have been forged from Excalibur? Like they melted down Excalibur and made him into some pistols.
That sounds familiar.
I think that's the Dark Tower. But I'm sorry, but like as lefty liberal bleeding heart guy as I am, the idea of a magical gun that somebody has forged, like it's Damascus welded steel or something like that, and it's got a name. Named weapons are just freaking like, that's just cool, man. It's just awesome. What else? What other, like, I feel like a magical iPhone doesn't really work. Like something about as useful as cell phones are, I don't feel like if you enchanted it and gave it a name, that really improved. Like, I'm not sure what else it gets out of that.
Well, if you have one that like can access like the ElfNet or something, or
the ElfNet. Yeah, that could be kind of cool. Them having their own interspersed internet with ours is really funny. I like that. Certainly, like paying a protection plan to like literally like signing up for a protection plan with the local elves who like keep your system from getting viruses, and they're the ones who handle all your system updates, so they always work. You have to pay protection money basically to them. I do like the Brownie Mafia, who are like, hey, that's a nice car there. I hope that nothing bad happens to it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and like they just have to prevent your life from going haywire by it threateningly. I like that.
I also like that, like maybe the main character of the story is like confronted with like how they've pissed off the brownies, like using some piece of technology they've made or something, and like, what, it was in the EULA, didn't you read that?
Of course, everything's in the EULA. Oh, that's good.
So is there what's the level of symbiosis for like house elves and humans at this point?
See, I had sort of imagined them as being a bit like rats or pigeons, where they're like, they really get along in the worlds we create, but that if they weren't there, we would be fine. But I'm totally cool with the idea of it being a more symbiotic relationship. In fact, maybe it's the way they view it is that they've domesticated us.
Interesting. Yeah.
They're like, oh, these humans are very useful, and we definitely like living in their world. And just because they're bigger than us and aren't restrained in the same way as we are, maybe they're guiding humans in a certain respect. Like that's how they ended up in control of the fashion and design industries. So
they're cats, is what you're saying.
Sure, yeah. Except a little bit more. Actually, you could just totally lean into it where like they're the like just as ridiculous as cats usually are. Like everybody always jokes about how the cats are the ones in charge, but what I always end up coming away from that is it's more like Jeeves and Woosters, where the guy who's nominally in charge is kind of a moron, and you actually have this like long-suffering valet who is so much more capable and has it together. And the only reason why Birdie ever even eats is because Jeeves is there to do it for him. And so I don't know which side of that is humans and which side of that is brownies, but that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like you really could make it where they're like literally always cleaning up our messes, and they're just like, oh God, if we need these guys because they get to go out during the day or whatnot, and they are like big and strong, and we just need them to, knock down our trees for us. Or it could be the other way around where they're like, they think they're in charge, but really if they left human civilization behind, they'd be worthless within a day. I don't know which way is better.
Do you think they're like drawing inspiration from humans as well as, or?
I think they like, okay, so we've established that they crave novelty, like they crave innovation and things like that. And that's what they get from us, which implies to me that they can't come up with new ideas on their own. Like they are, like at heart, they're still like the fairies who can't come up with new ideas. Now, they happen to be different from the other ones because they like new things, but they're still really only good at refining. So they need humans around to do the new and weird stuff in order to like properly introduce new ideas, which they can then take and refine and make better. But like true innovation is still something that like completely eludes them. Is that cool? I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I also kind of like the idea that maybe the introduction of the internet is kind of like almost like an evolutionary dead end for them, because like there's just so much new there that they can't fully incorporate it, and so they're basically like Reddit or Pinterest zombies, just constantly browsing.
Like breaks their brain.
Yeah, and like they don't like can't really do anything with it, but like all that information is there, and just swiping on Instagram, that kind of thing, over and over and over, getting this constant influx of novelty without doing anything with it.
Like by the time they come up with like a good version of a meme that they can send out, it's like the perfectly refined version, but it's 2 years too late now, and it's completely culturally irrelevant because the humans have already moved on. So you imagine like ElfNet is still stuck on I can't ask cheeseburger cat speak. Like it's all really, really old memes that they're still like struggling with.
But they finally worked out the perfect Rickroll, and they're just waiting to unleash it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, humans are now reverse Rickrolling, where Rick Astley has his own YouTube channel where he sings other stuff, and that's what people are now linking to. Maybe the brownies were responsible for the death of Vine, because they're like, we can't handle it. It's happening. It changes too quick. So like they pull some strings and get the whole thing shut down, and now TikTok has taken its place. And they're like, God damn it. Yeah, I like the idea that they are incapable of true innovation. It's all refining, which doubles down on my idea that Steve Jobs was actually a brownie, because that's what he did. He tended to steal stuff and make it better than other people, but never actually like come up with anything new on its own, on their own. Yeah, that's Apple's whole deal.
Oh, yeah. Is there anything that would be like complete anathema to house elves? Like we've talked about like how they tried to get away from like stagnation and like things like boredom or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that they don't have quite the same weaknesses that regular fairies do. So like maybe they handle iron better than normal one, than a traditional fairy does, because they've been living with us for 4,000 years and they've gotten acclimated. So I like some of those, but definitely giving them some sort of weakness, some sort of like anti-ness is good. I'm not sure. You could go really esoteric with it and say like they can't handle like tradition, like things that like stay the same because people like them to stay the same, that like nostalgia maybe even could be something that they don't get.
Interesting.
Or you could go like super concrete and say that, they really don't like super glue or something. I don't know. Like you could go like you could just pick something new and be like, now that's just the thing that throws them off. Or maybe they don't like cats because cats function this like take over their function in the household. Uh-huh. And also tends to hunt them down and bat them around like they do other small creatures.
I was kind of thinking like if you like deprive a brownie of stimulus for 24 hours or something, like they just die of boredom or something,
or they go into a catatonic state and from which they can't be roused.
Yeah,
and maybe or like they go catatonic but like unlike like a normal creature which would like fall over and like look like it's unconscious, they just become super stiff and stone-like, and that is where a bunch of like the garden statues that people have come from.
Garden gnomes are just petrified brownies.
Yep, garden gnomes are petrified brownies, or at least that's where the fashion started accidentally, because people saw, they're like, oh, I like your little garden gnome, and they're like, my what now? And they're like, I'm gonna make one of those for myself. And I think that also, like you were saying, the lack of novelty, lack of innovation, lack of seeing new things drives them to a catatonic state. I think also we mentioned earlier, or I think it was you who mentioned earlier, the idea that like the internet like traps them, like it breaks their brains, you know, or like if they sit there like scrolling, if they find a source of like new innovative ideas, they will just keep scrolling forever. So things like message boards and Reddit and Twitter and Tumblr and things like that, Pinterest, just like traps them. And so they all like it's deeply interesting to all of them. Like they all really, really want to get into it. And like they're all like secretly really want to get on those sites. But there's like a giant like Dare style program through the brownie community who is like, you know, just say no to social media and just say no to internet memes and things like that, because it will, too many good gnomes too many good brownies have been lost to never scrolling RSS feeds and stuff like that. And also, I'm sorry, I just thought of the idea of just say gnome. And I apologize. I know.
Thanks. I hate it.
Well, on that note, do you want to call it? Is that the end? Did I kill it for us?
Unless there's anything else we can wring out of this.
Yeah, I feel like the steam's running out of the idea a little bit, unless you have another angle to take on it.
No, I think that's kind of a interesting idea to end on, with like just that there can be too much. For
I like the idea of their weakness and strengths, or like their weakness being both too much and too little of this thing that they crave. Mm-hmm. That feels very almost human to me. Like it feels good. I like that a lot. And then maybe they also really hate polka music or something. Like, you can always give them some. I always like really weird esoteric weaknesses for creatures sometimes, where it's like they just can't stand something really stupid is really great. And also cats.
And also
it's too much like
cats and polka music, and also infinite Reddit loops.
Yep. Or the lack thereof completely. Yes. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take off. Bye.
All right. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. We are still looking for some listener questions for an upcoming Q&A episode as part of our 1-year anniversary, which is just around the corner, which seems absolutely bizarre to me that we've been around that long. But if you've got a question for us to answer in a future episode, just fire that at our Twitter, which is @MonsterMPod, or you can email us at monstermechanicspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now to the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and co-hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas generated during our podcast are released under a do what the f*** you want public license.